Ladies and gentlemen, merhaba. Hoş geldiniz. Welcome to my lecture on Turkey. I have Klein Turkije, Stad Gent. Nou, even kijken, zo werkt hij. Vond ik wel schattig. And it's my pleasure to invite you to a lesson on Turkey. Before I take off the ridiculous hat, let me also share a little PowerPoint with you and explain the background of waar is dat ding? Hier dan. Yes, I'm in business. Welcome to Turkey, Turkiye. What is with the hat? Well, it's called a fez, and it's called after a Moroccan city. That's where they used to dye the felt, but actually that was an expensive method with berries and everything. And mostly it was done in what's nowadays called Czech Republic. Oh yes. In 1829, Sultan Ahmed, he ordered all civil servants of the Ottoman Empire to wear a plain fez. You have to realize that this was modernism, because before that they had all these turbans and all the difficulty quality levels of different hierarchy was visual through the hat, and he said we're all the same. So it is early inspired kind of egalitarian style. This was a symbol of modernism for a long time, until slowly it started to 100 years later, people started to identify it with differences. And then Atatürk decided in 1925, so a few years after the foundation of the Turkish Republic, that they had to stop it. And in the beginning, a lot of people were against it. Can you believe they were hanging and killing people because they were still wanting to wear it? Whereas in the beginning, everybody was against wearing it. So that's the waves of culture. Enough about the hat and enough about this Roermond Dutch member of parliament previously. Turkey. Turkey is a large country, and the population now would be somewhere in the 80s, but they're projected in 2040 to go towards the 100 million, 94 million. The time zone is 1 hour earlier than it is here in the Central European summertime. The calling code of the country is 90, and the internet abbreviation is .tr. It is a beautiful country. It is a country with enormous amount of tourists, and a lot of people think of paid holiday packages with beach, and that's true. There is a lot of beaches. There is delicious food. There's also really terrible food, but overall, this is one of the top kitchens of the world, culinary speaking, an incredibly rich tradition. This country is full of archaeological treasures, and you have to realize that a lot of where, let's say, even the Christian heritage started is nowadays Turkey. This has been Roman, this has been Hellenic. It's beautiful. I think there are so many beautiful temples and things like Colossia and other archaeological treasures. You can't believe it, and it's still so easy to access there and in very good shape often. So that is something that the nature has been also very much giving. These are sinkholes, potholes, where probably because of underground rivers that collapsed, we have these strange areas. And there's a little church at the bottom in one of them, and they represent heaven and hell. And there is just you have the caves in and the salt, but there's so much to see in that country. Modern day Turkey came into existence in 1923. And it was a country that before it was I needed it actually. Before it was Ottoman Empire, but it's such a strategic location. And it is also right at this spot here where Europe and Asia meet each other. And we will talk about that later. It used to be an enormous empire. It used to be parts of nowadays Russia, Georgia, Iran, Azerbaijan, and even much further. But also large parts of Europe. and a lot of what we call traditional dances in more Balkan or Greek areas, or Bulgarian yogurt. Of course it is, but the word yogurt is a Turkic word. So those are interesting elements to realize. Very strong influence on the coffee that people in the provinces of Slovenia or other areas in Romania drink is actually still, a lot of it is still Turkic, and the names of patlıcana, which is the name of eggplant, which is patlıcan, which is Turkish. So there is very strong influences in South and Eastern Europe that have been 400 years dominated by the Ottoman culture, but also as far as Morocco is where the empire came at a certain stage. So it's been very, very influential. The Venetians, the Turins, the Genovese, they all sailed. They had parts of islands that they occupied close to Turkey, but also parts of Istanbul before it, or Constantinople, as it has been called a long time, were actually also of the Italian city-states. Now, long story. If we look at nowadays Turkey, it is a large country. And if we look at consumer spendings, despite the lira and the currency problem that the country knows, you see that consumer spendings are going pretty fast. And if I look only at the differences of this year and this year, yeah, you can see it's really going up, and it's 50% higher in a limited time of 3.5 years. So obviously this is a market that is what it does. It's a growth market. It's an emerging market. But the political instability and the governmental choices in forms of currency and valuta is influencing the reality of trade. Then what about the European Union and Turkey? There has been a lot of debate on that. And let me give you one slide of background, which is not a lot, but that's what I do now. We made a trade agreement as Europeans. I said we because I worked in Brussels for such a long time. And we have the EU-Turkey Custom Union, a trade agreement that was signed and ratified in 1995. And as a result of that, goods are manufactured goods. They're industrial made goods. They are free to travel without any custom restriction. All you need is a certain kind of T form that needs to be stamped, and off you go in the truck, and it goes into the market. It really boosted trade, and 65% we saw an increase in EU-Turkey trade. This is spectacular. This is really a lot. It means jobs, it means money, it means upward trends. Turkish agriculture has, until now, been heavily protected, and they are afraid in Ankara that the European, particularly the Dutch, they will flood the markets and will make everybody unemployed. If I'm honest, the Turkish system at the moment is just for votes. I think this is done because the inefficiency, the rural inefficiency, is shocking. They're tiny little farmers, and in fact, as a consumer in the city, you are paying for votes that the AK Partisi wants. If I'm honest, that's the reality of things. Because consumers could be getting, like you see it in Japan as well, you pay too much in the supermarkets. In 1999, so 4 years after the EU-Turkey Custom Union, the EU candidature was started. Now you have to realize this was at a time we just left the Soviet Union, so it was very good to have that buffer, and there was still the enthusiasm of EU-Turkey. But that didn't stay, and the political context within Turkey changed, and people started to doubt. And let's say maybe there is some racism in this as well, occasionally with certain countries. But in 2005, the accession negotiations started with Turkey. But to be honest, there is very little progress. and there's very little evidence of political will to make this happen. And I think the frustration on the Ankara side is huge, but I don't think it's going to happen, personally. If we look at the trade, we can see that the trade, the custom union that has been created, and you have to think of like the early Benelux or Belgium-Luxembourg system applies also with EU and Turkey. And you see that Europe now is the largest part for the exports, and there's tiny South America doesn't exist, or Oceania, the Americas, Africa, and even Asia is a lot smaller. And Asia, of course, used to be much, much bigger before 1995. So this is a great success, and it pulls Ankara slightly into the European hemisphere. And in that light, recently we saw that the Prime Minister of the Netherlands at the time and the President of Turkey have met, and they want to increase the trade volume, almost double it, from 11 billion to 20 billion. And Rutte also explained that there is 25 Turkish companies in the Netherlands that employ way over 80,000 people. So there is trade, and trade will grow. And I don't think you need to really understand the Turkish language to understand the meaning of these remarks that the guys are holding. It's only guys, huh? We're the ladies. Good. Time to talk about money. I think I have one of the coins. Did I lose it? I did. Where is my lira? So this is the L with two signs, like always in currency. And this is the lira, the Turkish lira. And the Turkish lira for a long time used to be around 6.5 lira for €1. But something really went wrong with the lira. And at the moment when I'm recording this video, it's 50.5 lira for €1. So what the heck happened? Well, at the moment, 100 lira, and that's the bills you see there, are €6.5, but who knows what will happen. But if we look at this red line here at the bottom, you can see the currency crisis that Turkey has been undergoing. And in the last 10 years, it diminished its value. And this is a scary thing for a country that wants to grow. Nevertheless, there are still, here you see actually the television tower. It's brand new. This is a picture of the GDP growth. And we see that the projections for 2025 are substantial, and it's really going to grow. So I don't know how this will be affected by the level, the currency crisis that the lira is undergoing, and the governmental choices that are being made for this. But the prospect in the long term is a positive one. Something about the language. The Turk alphabet is 29 letters, and that is because 3 are missing and 6 are added. So that's how we get there. So we also have more vowels, and there's a couple that U in the Ö, but also the U. And that is an I without the dot, the undotted I. And it's very important in Turkey, or in the Turkish language. You have to realize that the alphabet has been Latinized because they were using the Arabic script. And then Atatürk really wanted to modernize Turkey. And part of the reforms were also to make use of the Latinized alphabet. And a lot of things under the Atatürk presidency were changed in order to make it a super modern state and to overcome the losses, because the Ottoman Empire was completely shrunk to a tiny little country, and it used used to be a huge empire. Now, what was the advantage of the Latinized alphabet is that it was much easier to pronounce things the Turkish way. And I think that was one of the successes why it worked, plus a very intensive schooling operation and to fight analphabetism in Turkey has been undertaken. Now, here we see a couple of letters that are really different, and the Ö, the U, and the now this is the G. It's not a G. It's actually a non-silent one. So, for instance, the name Erdoğan. So it's Doğan, but actually also our lecturer Aynur Doğan is spelled this way. So it's not Mrs. Doğan. It's Mrs. Doğan. If you do it properly, then there are three letters missing, and I know somebody who's called William, and if he wants to get a Turkish nationality, which he is considering, he cannot call himself William any longer in his passport. He will be called Gilliam or William or something, but he's not able to use the W that he had in his original when he was born. However, they are being used in the Latinized Kurdish, the Kurdic language, and a large percentage still of the population is Kurdish, not only in Turkey, also in other countries around the region. I want to talk about Eurasia, and I want to talk about it because Istanbul is on the bridge of the Asian civilization and the European civilization, and it is a bridging culture, country, whatever you want to call it. And we have Europe here. Here's the Black Sea, Sea of Marmara, but also, of course, Mediterranean, if you like. And here is Asia, and over the Bosporus we have the three bridges, and they are making a tunnel as well, where you see the connection between Asia and Europe. And historically, this has been very, very, very strong. And you can see that. So when you are driving on the tollways, these bridges, you can see the bridge between civilization, because it says you are leaving Asia, hoş geldiniz, welcome to Asia. And Avrupa is Europe, hoş geldiniz, welcome to Europe. So that's on the bridge over here, the Bosporus. What is interesting is that the first people flying, but really like a considerable amount, a larger distance, was actually in Turkey. It's not the Wright brothers, the first transatlantic. And that's the funny part, because if you say, well, this is Europe and this is Asia, can you call it, well, maybe not transatlantic, but you can call it transcontinental. And so it wasn't the Wright brothers, it was actually this gentleman. And I'll show you a little clip. So, of course, we had the scientist in Italy, but he didn't really fly. He designed it, but this guy did, and I'll show you a clip. Amazing. This guy flew over the water. I want to stay a little bit still in Istanbul, wonderful place, and talk a little bit about some of the most important cities. If we look at the size of the cities, it's enormous. 15 million people. Ankara, 5 million people. Izmir, 3. Bursa, 2. Adana, Gaziantep. Big, big, big cities. And we see that the urbanization that took place in Turkey has been incredible. And it's people go there to get jobs. And so Yeah, some pictures of a magnificent city, a huge city. Um, Actually, the biggest city in Europe. Huh? There you see the other bridge. Um, and these bridges are very high because ships need to go under it. At the moment, no Russian boats, but that will soon be fixed again. We pray. No, longer pictures. Istanbul is, and if you watch the spelling of Istanbul is a capital dotted I. So we have a dotted I for the small letter in our alphabet, and then if we have the capital I, it's actually without a dot. But since there are two letters, one without and one with, also the capitals show that distinction. Istanbul used to be called Constantinople, named after Emperor Constantinus. And before the Romans there, it was called Byzantion, of the Byzantine culture. Um, it has a mystical magnetism that conquerors and empires always need to go to that place. Constantinople was the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, and they called themselves Romans after Rome, La Città Eterna, was conquered. Constantinople still prolonged the Roman Empire, and in 1453 it got conquered, and it got its renaissance as Istanbul with a dotted capital I and not one like this. Um, it is an amazing town. This is Istiklal Caddesi for tourists. You know this. This is the cute tram going to Taksim, and on the other end you also have the Dutch General Consulate, which is a beautiful palace if you ever get the chance to see it. It's at the end, close to Tunnel. Very nice area and a very exciting place to be. I should say I've been there many times, and I hope to be many times more. Um, I told you Istanbul is the biggest city in Europe, and I include Moscow in that. And it's all way bigger than London, St. Petersburg, Berlin, Madrid, Kiev, Rome, Bucharest, and Paris. And you can see it's really a big place. And as a result, it accounts for a quarter of Turkish GDP, 40% of the nation taxes, but not so many people pay taxes in Turkey. 60% of trade is conducted in Istanbul. 1/3 of Turkey's total exports is realized there, but that's because of course, also the agriculture is strong, and not that many of the largest Turkish enterprises. I expected more, but it's probably because the traffic is so unworkable there. Um, Napoleon Bonaparte, he said, if the world would need a capital, it certainly would be Istanbul, and it is a magnificent place, especially if you're in the Golden Horn or the Bosporus. It is so impressive, and if you're on the little boats or if you take the water buses, it is spectacular. That's anybody will agree to that. The other town we need to discuss is Ankara, also a big town. And as Atatürk came to power, he decided to move the capital, plural reasons, but most of all because it was too easy to attack for European powers. Because bear in mind, they did that before. They conquered Turkey, and it was Atatürk as a general of the forces who could win some battles and became a politician. And also they wanted maybe to get away of all the typical palace culture and all the corruption that took place at those days, and they decided to have a real civil servants place. Many other countries did this as well. Because it was on a new land, it's all well planned and it's elegant, it's clean, no shabby back alleys. Although nowadays we see that on the outsides of Ankara, you still see shabby quarters. It is a city that is very much a political hothouse. Ankara, that is where and a lot of these buildings are also part of the government. So you'll be living close to your colleagues as well. So it is, yeah. I just refer to the areas around the cities, and almost every the Gecekondu settlements, and there we don't see a role of the state. We actually see an absence of the state in urban planning and urban development. And many cultures, especially in the upcoming countries, we see that rural migrants that urbanization, they just make informal housing. Nigeria, you see it in Lagos. There's whole areas where it's full of it. In Brazil, we see it, Argentina, and a lot of countries where there is, yeah, vacant land or state-owned. They don't have any legal rights, but they just build overnight simple settlements. They're not even houses, but a metal door, metal roof. But if a family lives there, it slowly improves with the income. And sometimes you see little palaces in between of the shanty towns. Almost half of the residential buildings in all major Turkish cities are built as gecekondu in defiance of planning permission. And when Erdogan was still in local politics and trying to get elected, they asked him, like, are you going to destroy the gecekondu housing? And he says, no, I live in one. So, and a lot of people say that actually helped him to win certain elections. So that's something that is a challenge, which is also, again, an opportunity, because it's very cheap to buy out the people that live there and, legally find it and then build big houses. So that's all possible. Turks originally are nomads. The Turks have not always been living in Turkey. In fact, they came from outer Mongolia. They came from Central Asia. So in the 11th century, Asia Minor, so now called Turkey, but there were no Turks at that time. And therefore it was called Asia Minor, Klein Azië. And it was lived in by Byzantines, by Greeks, by in the east a lot of Armenians, and then the Seljuk they crushed the Byzantine army, and you're talking about 60,000 people and so on. And the Turks took over Anatolia rather quickly, but it was not massively. It was smaller groups that, as nomads, migrated from Mongolia and from Kyrgyzstan, from this, from that. And they went to Anatolia, and slowly the process of Turkification started. We also see that the Turks are still living in Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and also the Crimean Tatars in, I don't know, I guess you would call it Russian Federation by now, if you believe in that, but also the Uyghur in China. And these are all descendants from Mongolian Turkic people that now it's called Turkey, but the origin is elsewhere. And when we had the Soviet Union, it was very difficult to have that connection. But since 1998, it started again. It's very popular in Turkey. And yeah, they are in all kind of ways exchanging, also linguistically. The Turkish diaspora, because you were a nomad, you always will stay a nomad. It's easy for Turks to move. They don't need a lot. And it's part of the mindset, I think. And if we look at the countries where there's more than 1 million Turks, naturally that's Turkey and neighboring countries. Also, by the way, in North Africa. But yeah, Germany and France, we definitely see that. And also in the Netherlands, there is quite a lot. Belgium, Denmark, Sweden, UK. So there is a lot. Bulgaria, of course, but there's also people that have been living there for a long, long time. In Greece, it used to be way more, but that I'll talk about in the end of my lesson. At the moment in Europe, we have 5.5. It says 5 million, but I think it's 5.5 ethnic Turks living in Europe. in the 60s and the 70s, we saw that Western European countries, they really needed, for the factories, they needed workers. So they signed labor recruitment agreements with the Turkish government. And it was the Turkish agencies that selected people and had procedures. And then they were moved to work in factories. But then, yeah, labor became too expensive and was moved either automatization and robotization, but also majority of the building and the making is now done in China. We see that yeah, there is like 500,000, but some people claim it's even more, of the Dutch Turkish community here in the Netherlands, and the same applies for Denmark, Germany, Netherlands. And the Turkish Germans are the largest Turkish community outside of Turkey. Some pictures, if you speak Dutch, they're funny. Mijn vader heeft 8 kilo kaas gekocht om mee te nemen naar Turkije. 8 kilo. Ik wil niks meer horen over mislukte integratie. And the herring of the Turkish brothers Taghi got the highest prize. And for the second year in a row, they won serving the best fresh herring. Now, for a Dutchman, this is holy, as is cheese. And these two talk about the Turkic connection. So that is about Turks going abroad, but the hospitality for refugees is by far the biggest in the world. Of course, it's logic with all the stuff that's happening around there, Syria, Afghanistan, but it's also possible like certain other, I think of the Emirates, they haven't done anything for Yemen or for Syria, whereas Turkey is absorbing everything, and that's almost going towards 4 million, because you don't know the clandestine ones. Colombia, of course, also has a large amount, and then Pakistan, that makes sense with what's happening. So we see a lot. Germany is always, after the Second World War, maybe also guilt feelings might influence the decision taking there, but it's been very much absorbing. On the other hand, Germany also has a declining population, so this helps to keep the levels of the society in balance. Good. I want to talk a little bit about something else, and about the kappas that we drink. What is typical? What do you always see a Turk drink? Chai. And this is a funny one because actually it doesn't fall over. It's a joke. But you have the cup like that, and then you hold it really careful in your hands because it's flaming hot. You're gonna burn your fingers, so you need to learn to sip it like that. It's tulip shaped. We'll get to talk about that. And the other one, which is very typical in Turkey, is the Türk kahvesi. So I have an adapted cup. The cups are always white inside. I'll explain you later why, but it's because you want to see the muddy coffee sediments that will stay, and then you enjoy the caffeine. Good. Let's talk about the beverages. This is how you make the Turkish coffee, and that is in a chefse, where you have the powder you put in, some sugar. Well, I made a little clip. That is very elaborate, and I'll show you a clip in a minute. It's elaborate, and therefore they also have machines now. And I noticed that even at the Mediamarkt here in the Netherlands, you can just buy the Beko wit keuken koffie espresso. Yeah, it's Turkish coffee, but also this is drunk in a lot of countries in Europe. Some call it Greek coffee, some not. I call it Türk kahvesi. And then you can make that automatically. How does it work? Here's a little clip. Needs to foam. Foam you spoon over, you put first some foam in, will come. You boil it up again a few times, it should not boil. Then you serve it with lokum. Good. What is the lokum? That is that's this one. And what you have is these are individually. We also have boxes, and they're quite good actually. Everything is sugary. Lekker. This one is with pomegranate and pistachio, pistache. They're pretty sugary. Mm, I want to talk a little bit about the so-called tasseography. What the hell is that? What people believe in is that they can tell the future for your love and your money with this, because the coffee is in the little pan you boil it in, or no, you don't boil it, you heat it up, you foam it in, and then the it comes into the cup as well. So after drinking, you should never drink it to the bottom, because then you have the mud in your mouth. But the bottom, you kind of turn it 3 times, and then you leave it like that for a while. And when it has dripped down, you look at yeah the sediments at the bottom, and there's patterns in them, and these patterns show you your future. I don't know, but it's quite normal that after dinner you will do it. You should never do your own cup, by the way. And then if you want something about your sex life or love, you put the ring on top. And if you want to know about your bank account, you put a coin on top. And then you have to make a little wish before you take it off. And then we look at it. Um, and here we see the sediment reading, and you see these patterns that we see, that the top of the cup is negative and this is positive. This is nearby future. This is the long future. So you hold the cup like that, and that's how you are reading it. You can also read the saucer, and then you say, "Oh, I see this, I see that," and there's guides you can buy for it. So yeah, is it important for business? I don't know, but it's quite normal that you share a lot of your time socially, and this is for sure going to be part of the meetings that you will have when there is a mixed group and you need to socialize with people. And this is a good way to, get personal information. Besides that, they also drink a lot of tea, and here is a funny a funny tea cup. This is tea powder. It's a black tea that people use, and no, yeah, anyway, it's tea, but it's the same shape as this one. Tea is very much drunk, and here we see Rize. Rize used to be Georgia, actually, the Republic of Georgia, and then the Russians gave it to Turkey when it was under Russian occupation. Those Russians. But this is lovely. It is yeah, lovely tea. It's very famous now. And the Turks are the biggest tea drinkers of the world. Mind you, the Irish and the English are also not bad as the Russians, but the Turks are by far, it's 2 times more, well, 3 times more than Moroccans. Could you think that possible? Or 3 times Egypt or Japan. China is the bottom one. We're the Dutchies in the middle, close to the South Africans. I wonder why. Yeah, and there on the right we also see Smith, little bread rolls, and boys sell them on the street with a stick, and I always think it's so amazing. Or these little carriages, these glass carriages you see on the street with red and white, sometimes with guys like this on. And then they sell these, and if they're fresh, oh, very good. Tea and Smithje. Yeah, nice, flaming hot, and always in these tulip shaped glass. Um, Tea is prepared in a, in a danluk, a chai danluk. So you have actually two, and the way it works that the water is in the big one, because it can be boiled like that, and you also have a little bit of the water in the tea leaves in this, and you get a very strong tea, and it's very flavored on top. And then what you do is that you pour in a bit of tea, and then you can say if you want it dark or achuk, light, and then extra normal water is added, so you have the taste of your preference. And that is how yeah, people drink tea, and they do that several times. There you have these typical, usually it's for men, where they sit in gardens or outside on wooden chairs, and then you just chit chat and drink tea. It is a social culture, and a lot of this socializing can take place that way. Sometimes you also think people are just unemployed. I don't know, but it's charming. The quality of the tea is not bad at all. Um, Consumption is at 3.5 kilo per capita, 4 glasses a day. And if you are in a business meeting, I bet you're gonna first get cups of tea, and they will be served like this. Maybe there's some sweets or some nuts with it. And the inchy belly, the slim waisted, 400 million are sold every year. I don't know why. Maybe they break or something. What is interesting is actually, and you'll be surprised if you're Turkish, chai drinking is not very old. It's actually started after the First World War, or a little bit the beginning of the Turkish Republic, so in 1923. And the reason why is that the Ottoman Empire had territories in the east, so Arabia, where they were making the coffee beans, and they lost these areas to the Brits, and as a result, they couldn't drink coffee anymore. Now that was a disaster. So they said, okay, we need something else. Let it be tea, and they copied the style from Russia, which then was Georgian province, and they started to cultivate it. It didn't go well at the beginning, but after a while, it became excellent tea. And the tea drinking is less than 100 years old in Turkey. That's an interesting fact, isn't it? And also the watching the coffee is actually a copy of the Chinese tea leaf watching. Your culture moves like a shadow. Turkey is still has very high import tariffs on tea. 145% is enormous, and that is to maintain the domestic market for locally produced teas. So much about tea. Da, da, da, da. Ba, ba, da, ba. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for bloopers. And the bloopers I've selected are painful. The first is a baby product brand, which is called Pedo, Pedo Plus. That is bad. Like pedophilia. Dat is niet echt een fijne naam. Pedo, een pakje pedo. And it's a baby product, so that is painful. This one is also interesting, Yaila. But semen is something that you would not like to have on your spaghetti or something else. And the reason is that it means something else in English. These are stills, cinemagraphs of old Turkish famous movies, famous chaps. This one is interesting. Eid Mubarak, Ramadan is finishes, and then everybody wants to buy food thingies, and they make a lot of advertisements for smoky bacon flavor. How can you do that after Ramadan? It's pork. But yeah, marketing managers don't always read English very well. That is, and they like the taste, and they think, "Ah, great," but I wouldn't do it. Good. If we talk about religion, because when you talk about Ramadan, that is, you have to realize that the largest amount of mosque per capita worldwide is Turkey. Turkish government, present government states that 99% of the population is a Muslim. It seems to be less, but it's still very, very much a Muslim country. Of the Muslim, which is, let's say, 92% of the country, 90% is the Sunni branch of Islam. And we also have 10%, and I was surprised by the numbers, of the Alevi faith. A very small part of the Turkish population is Christian. That is usually Greek Orthodox. And that's interesting because you have to realize that a lot of the Christian origins and the important locations, and it's not just Palestine and Israel, it's also in Turkey, nowadays Turkey, where a lot of the original important places or people buried is actually in Turkey. So it's, and in the past it used to be a lot of Christians, but that has been, yeah, carefully, yeah, what can I say? What is a bit shocking at times and sometimes difficult to understand for outsiders is that that you would think Muslim is a Muslim, but there is a strong division, and this is not that long ago, where people that have the Alevi belief, their houses are being painted in red, and you can imagine that scares the hell out of you. What is the Alevi religion? Well, there is also the Prophet Ali, just like Muhammad, and they say, well, they're the two halves of an apple. Alevi like to point out that they are monogamous, so not the possibility to have 4 wives. And I think the position of women is somehow different. As Alevi women are encouraged to get the best education, and they can choose any occupation they prefer. We see that in the history, but also in the recent history, Alevi have been victims of pogroms, of people trying to kick out those that were different. And this includes the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. But the paintings you just saw are just a few years ago. And a lot of houses and homes have been put to fire and torched. I was surprised because I didn't know it was so difficult still. I want to step out of the discussion and go into the lighter part. Nazar. The Navi Bunjuk is the eye-shaped amulet, and you see it everywhere. What is it? It is an amulet that looks a bit like an eye, and it's supposed to protect you against the evil eye. The word Nazar actually comes from Arabic, and it means sight or watching over or attention. And it helps you. It protects you. So often at houses, but also for babies, you see there is a little Nazar. And for the tourism industry, they started to like it, and you can buy a lot of them. And they're quite creative often at times. Another thing related as part of the religion is the circumcision. When I looked it up, it was called male circumcision, meaning that apparently there's also a female circumcision. And the boys are always dressed up like little princes, and then you will lose part of your thingy. I really had to smile when I saw these business cards. Sunechi means circumcisioner. So that's a different way. I want to go into a little bit more serious part of my presentation, namely the cultural differences that you need to take into account. And it would be interesting to see if it works both ways. So if you have a Turkish background, if this applies to you, and if you recognize patterns, and if you don't have a Turkish background or an interest, then see how you can be part of that GDP growth and be an entrepreneur. But you need to take into account a couple of, maybe let's do the gap analysis here culturally. I think Turks are very much collectivist people. They do things in groups. They don't like to do them individually or in pairs. So whereas it's perfectly fine to go out alone in the Netherlands, to eat alone, I don't think that's going to be part of your lifestyle in Turkey, because people also will try to look after you. They feel sorry for you that you're alone. So privacy is also not really understood. And that we see in most parts of the world, but the individualism is very much tied to the Western lifestyle. But at work, it also has this group thing influences the way your leadership styles or your management styles will function. And as if it is a group, it's difficult to get individuals to take responsibility. Now, I know that when I'm teaching in China and I ask a question, who wants to do this? Of course, you get this quiet. Nobody wants to do that, and it isn't going to be any different. Therefore, you need to find group strategies, and you're not used to that. Trainers, American trainers, I've seen in big trouble because they didn't take that into account. And America is the most individual society. Turkey is not. And there you need to find a way. I think people in Turkey are much more concerned with group success and unity. So if you can address that in a way, then that's going to be a positive effect for your leadership style. But if you do that on an individual level or individual rewards, it's not the smartest, actually. We see that the old-style Turkish boss is a formal, authoritative, top-down, gives orders. And then the middle management does the fact-checking and puts a stamp on the paperwork. And there is a bit of bureaucracy in that sense. But that's the way it functioned for centuries. So why would you try to change that? And do you think you're gonna be able to change it? Often we see that members of the owner's family, because the majority is family business, Turkey is a collectivist country, and the leader therefore adopts a paternalistic attitude, a father-like style. And that means you need to act like the father of a child, and therefore you need to also listen and educate and support when trouble is needed and give a shoulder to cry on. And that is part of the business process. And Western people tend to totally focus alone on the dry business processes, but you need to give attention to the people. Latins will have no problem doing this. People from Brazil, they know exactly how this works in Turkey. But are you a person like that? Or if you're not, put in some time, think about it before you start. Hierarchy is very important in anything in the business context, but also in the family. And decision making is a top-down approach. The business circle is very patriarchal and male-dominated. Although you see Turkish businesswomen and they have good positions, some rich ladies, but I would say in general it's male-dominated. There's one thing that you have to see, and this is the Mediterranean way. Anything you want to get done is going to go through social connections. If there is a problem, the relationship is leading, and therefore you need to find a discussion to address the conflict. Probably you're going to call upon an elderly person who is neutral and respected by all in order to fix the problem. Bargaining is a very, very common element in anything. And that you will see that also people with a Turkish background in the Netherlands, they like to bargain with the lecturer for the grades, for the delivery date, and in shops they try to make things easier because it's part of the cultural pattern that has been influenced in the home situation. Of course, there's way more than that, and there's many parallel and patterns that influence the coming of age of people, but the home situation of both parents is very leading as well. Now, what I've done is that I've made an overview of most of the deeper cultural values that we know from the likes like Hofstede and Trompenaars and Hall and Shine and anything, Strotbeck, and so there's a lot of these deeper values, and here you see them. What we see is that the bigger the distance between the two flags, the bigger your problem will be. And there you see that, let's say, I see that with students of a Turkish background, they would like to talk to you and sir, after lesson, and talk a little bit to smoothen the pathway for the grade. And you have task and relationship, and they like to get into the relationship because that seems like the natural thing to do. Now, if you are a Turk, working as a newcomer in the Dutch society, because we see at the moment a lot of Turkish are emigrating for several reasons, and the news will tell us why, then you're too much playing your relationship cards, whereas it needs to be task oriented. If you are, as a Dutchman, going to have a factory or do some job in Turkey, you are too task oriented, and the people will not really appreciate your style. The other big problem is the directness, the explicit versus the implicit. We'll talk about that later. We also see that shared and concentrated is that people in the Netherlands are very open about sharing information and also give everything away. Whereas in Turkey, it's very difficult to share information. And so we see basically everything except for for these two are well, three if you like. But this is individual, and group is also a big difference. Anyhow, it's not the same. Um, you have to realize that you are more than the individual you, and that means that your job title is not just your working hours, your university, are you a director or this or that. It also boils down to your family, and it affects your family and the honor of the family. What you do as a young girl can also therefore, and that's the yeah, the we, well, you know what I mean. But often you'll get questions like, where are you from? Which school did you go to? Which family are you from? And if you talk in Turkey, and you see that what Turkish people always get asked is where are you from? And that usually is your hometown. But probably most people were born in some village. But we see that despite urbanism going to the big cities, because the 15 million in Istanbul, do you think 20 years ago it was 50 million? Absolutely not. It exploded, the urbanism in Turkey. And to be honest, the government has not been able to manage that one way or another. They're too much worried about their own Panama paper bank accounts. But concept of hometown, memleket, is very, very strong. So it's always like, where does your family originate from? The regionalism is still strong. So usually you will see that even in, for instance, in restaurants, they would like to put in the name Gaziantep if they are from there. So it attracts others. There's a lot of groups on social media that refer to this hometown concept. Memleket. Good. Honor and pride and respect is very important. We also see that in the Latin world, particularly in the Hispano-Hablante, the Spanish-speaking cultures. Respect, pride, pundonor is very important. Well, no less in Turkey. Individuals will be ranked by status, and also ancianity is very, very significant. People will respect older people, and yeah. Now, one element that you need to understand is the face-saving aspect of Turkish business life. What I mean is that you need to respect the honor and the pride of a person or of a company. So criticizing somebody who is at the top level, the board, or a junior in front of her or his peers is not done. This will stick on you as a bad shadow forever. Um, but we also see it another way. We see the way people have titles, and instead of saying Mr. Higgins, if you want to refer to Chris, it is much nicer to give honor and pride. And that will be by the first name. And you have to realize that family names are only very recent. So the language was older than the family names, I think, as well. So when somebody will be called, you can't say Mr. Chris, you would say Chris Hoja, Chris lecturer, Chris teacher. Uh, and if you would like to call me Mr. Or for instance, Ainur Mrs., you would say Sander Bey and Ainur Hanam. And here again, you see an I without a dot, a dotless I, Hanam. And the other thing is that if you have grown up in an area where you have larger amount of Turkish people, you must have heard Abi, which means brother. So instead of saying just, hey, Atay, come for dinner, it is rude. You have to say Atay Abe. And if you have an aunt, you can't just call her Sera. You have to, it's just rude. You have to say Zerateze or Alidaye. If it is the brother of the mother. So we have maternal and paternal ways of, we don't just have uncle. Grandfather, Hüseyingasa Dede, and Hatice is the grandmother, but you need to add the title. We saw this also in other Asian cultures. When we talked about Korea, in China, it's better to use the name plus the title, and that gives respect and honor. It's all about that in Asia. Now, again, I show you the differences that we see, but now I would like to indicate that indirectness is much more appreciated in Turkish culture. And this includes the business culture. Implicit communication is because in Turkey they value emotional respect. And to say no to somebody in their face would be respectless, and it would cause emotional damage. And in Asia, you always try to avoid that direct confrontation. So if people in business give you a positive response, but say, oh, maybe we can order next month or so, it actually means no, you just don't want to hurt your feelings. But you didn't understand that, and you're starting production, but you misunderstood communication. It's implicit communication. And particularly the Dutch or the Germans or Americans, they're very open. They really want to share all negative and positive and unsolicited feedback is being given to you, or feed forward, I suppose. In Turkey, this is not seen as a positive attribute. It is seen very negative because it attacks the harmony, and a harmonious relationship is what you need to achieve. That is the Mediterranean style, that is the Asian style, and the typical Dutch or Danish way is not good. Norwegian style, forget about it. The funny thing is, or the logical thing is, that also refers to yourself. So instead of admitting my own mistake, and I was just honest. Well, I don't know, because it actually you bring down your own face, and people will really say, "Oh, don't say it, don't say it," because you are bringing yourself down, and they don't want that shame, because shame is not good. It harms the harmony. So instead of saying, "Well, it was my mistake," maybe I will shift the blame. Interesting, no? And how are you going to deal with that yourself when you are in situations where the implicit communication seems to be the ruling choice of giving feedback? So it's good to understand that. And then I want to talk about emotions. Why the Nazar? Oh, why not? It's a pretty picture. Expressive and emotional, they are so much in Turkey, and you are so much not enough, if you know what I mean. And it's about kinesics, so the facial expressions, the posture, how you're standing. You need to show actively that you are interested. If not, you're too distant. That doesn't look good. Oculesics is the regular eye contact, more than you're used to. It is important because it inspires trust. Proxemics, the same thing. You should not stand too far away. People want to be close to you. They want to touch you, at least men, women, women. And there's a lot of touching. Also, squeezing is quite positive. You have to like that. Not everybody will appreciate all the pinching that takes place in Turkey, or Portugal for that matter. So neutral and unemotional behavior can actually be perceived in the wrong way, as uncaring, as distant, as robotic. So be careful that you are emotional enough. We saw it before when we talked about Brazil. So you do need to have a little bit more Latin spirit, Mediterranean. You need to be asking about the well-being of others, their people. And 50% should be interested in the people, and 50% can be business processes. But we overvalue the business processes, and it's not good in the Turkish way. It's just rude, they feel. Another thing I noticed is that people are over passionate. If you watch the movies, the songs, but also the sport fans, they are so passionate. I've often seen Turkish families or people that can cry together, and they are sharing their emotion as a group activity, and they're all crying. And how can you deal with that? Well, in their eyes, you're a distant, cold-hearted butcher or a bitch. Is that the way it is? Well, we're all people, and we try to do, but you don't need to start crying automatically. But please be cognizant of the fact that you need to be slightly more emotional.
Hallo. Selam. Selam. Komm, setz dich. Schon angefangen? Ja, biraz daha. Biraz daha. Hah, burası.
İstanbul.
İstanbul mu?
Burası İstanbul. Tam burası. Tekle duble arası. Beklemediğim bir anda vurur hatırası. Hatırlarsın. Hani kaptırırdın yokuş aşağısı. Bir dönerdin köşeyi. Karşında boğaz manzarası. İlk defa görmüş gibi kesilirdi nefesin. Her ama her defası. Burası İstanbul. Tam burası. Beyoğlu Pera sineması. Güzel bir film sonrası. Yürürken Karaköy'e eli değdi eline. Kalpleriniz tutuştu. Duyuldu yağmurun sesi. Sırtında onun parkası. Burası İstanbul. Tam burası. Kayıkların arası. Baba kız buluşması. Karşıda Galatası, ortada salatası. Sen anlattın, o dinledi.
Benim güzel kızım.
Bu kocaman şehirde yoktu sizden başkası. Burası İstanbul. Tam burası. AKM'ye yürüdüm. Sabahın 3'ü olmuş. Dolmuş seninle dolmuş. Ne kararlar alınmış. İki yaka arası.
Burası İstanbul. Now did you cry or not? Jankovic schiet. Okay, from emotions we go to the clock. The punctuality. In Turkey, a lot of research is conducted, and some of them are on punctuality. And Wilkins says punctuality is designed to be very generous. Failing a deadline is not so bad, says Koitek in 2007. And I also noticed, and you also noticed that here, when you are in a Uber ride, that people like to do multiple jobs or projects at the same time. They jump at chances, and it is something that is a motivating factor, and it's a positive thing. But in order to deal with that, you also need to communicate priorities and timelines. I have here the spectrum, as I usually do. And we see where the Netherlands and Turkey are. They are pretty far apart. So, yeah, I think in business, punctuality is important. But there's a couple of things that also influence it. And I think there is a more relaxed attitude towards time. And you have to understand the vagaries of traffic in Istanbul, because it is difficult. On the other hand, you also have public transport that is well organized. Planning is very stretchable, and sometimes there is a Bayram, that a holiday day. So people like to improvise, and they do that last minute, and you will see a lot of loud calls, including here in the Netherlands, in train stations or so. There's always people calling and calling and calling, and last minute decisions, and planning is not always appreciated. It is the Mediterranean way. And for them, a meeting is a process that also should be with a certain social quality and enjoyable. And it should not always be ruled by the clock. And it is also about the good setting with the food. And this we see in Italy, we see in Spain, we see in Portugal, we see in France, to some extent even in Belgium. So it is another way of living, but it's going to clash with the expectations of the Swiss, the German, the Scandinavian, or the Dutch. What we often see is that meetings will continue longer. They exceed the allotted time. And then usually that's because of social things, or people are really talkative in ways. You should take into account that people on the Fridays would like to visit the mosque maybe, so that's not a good day to plan visits. What else? Well, if we complain about punctuality, let us also take into account that nobody in the world makes longer hours than the Turks. The offices stay open so much. I thought Japan and Korea are extreme, but Turks are. On the other hand, Turks and South Koreans and Japanese all connect to the Mongolians. But yeah, so there is hard work. And you see that Sweden is at 1.9. There is a very strict division between what's private and what's for the office. And yeah, now Greek is also working much longer, but you have to realize that for 400 years it has been part of Turkey. So that style continued to some extent. What are challenges for the country? Because there's all this good talk that I do. There must be something wrong. Well, there is. There's a couple of things, and let's talk about them. There is a mixed economy still, meaning also the government takes a lot of decisions. Rule of law in Turkey is measured as medium, which is difficult if you want to go to court. And how does it work? Control of corruption is rated as medium, and I'll show you some scores on that, on corruption, later. The regulatory quality in Turkey is also on a medium level. It's just there seems to be a lot of protection missing. There's incredible bureaucracy, ineffective enforcement of regulations, and they are really barriers to business. More countries have that. Brazil, Argentina, India, they are struggling also with this bureaucratic burden that society imposes on business. More challenges faced. I already told you about the financial challenges, the lira, how this is developing in a very negative trend. We also see that the foreign direct investment seems to be missing. You can imagine that people are afraid to invest their money there. Level of English proficiency is very low in Turkey at the moment. They claim 17%, but I don't think 1/4 of the people speaks. They would not know anything except taxi. And those are the loan words. Government offices or even post offices, there seem to be endless queue of people that need signatures and stamps and bureaucracy that's between you and what you need. The global competitiveness score is very low, 61. And I need to talk about some of the things happening in politics at the moment. We see a decline of pluralism and liberalism within the public discourse. And we also see persistent civil rights shortcomings and societal unrest, including, tanks shooting at own civilians and entire villages and cities that are being attacked by the army. I'm not into politics, but it is not a quiet situation, and that is a challenge for society if that happens in your country. And then the transparency. We see here the Zorro mask, and we also see that there. You see it a lot in cartoons and other things. People are wearing them here. What are they complaining about? Well, let me share with you the transparency score, the corruption perception index, and how, see, under the Erdogan presidency, how this been dramatically been going up. And we see it more than doubled. There's very few countries that have had such a negative score the last 10 years. But Turkey certainly applies that. And it's a lot of things like state banks seem to be run like a family business. These are things that raise eyebrows in the rest of the business world, and this scares investors away. So yeah, there is some use of public funding in a way that you sometimes think, well, and there must be a price, and there is. And corruption is at the moment at a very high level in Turkey, much higher than it has been recently. Pekunian on OLED, money doesn't stink. I want to bridge it and go into another topic, and therefore, as a little bridge, I have that actually Turks are the biggest user of perfume in the world, and France can claim that it's producing them, but it's not using it as much as the Turks are. That's also in the Arab cultures, and this perfume is very important. One thing that I would like to share is this kind of cologne. It's called cologne, and these are kind of bottles, and when you are visiting a house, then you have these, you get a drop in your hand. Let's do it. And then you kind of wash your hands, or even here is okay. And then you smell nice. This is a good brand, by the way, also a fashion brand. Wacko, I love their stuff. And it's cheap now with the cheap lira. But anyway, so you smell nicer, and also even if you're in a bus, a public bus or something, people will give you some cologne to welcome you and also to disinfect maybe. Good. We go into a little bit stricter world, and I'm slowly going to close my lecture on Turkey. The police has been in almost civil wars at times. But look at this guy there standing next to the police guys. They're still calming down, but the battles they have fought in Taksim, and man, it was a war zone, and many times, and so challenging. And we see also that this applies to the internet, not as strict as in Russia or in China, but pretty strict. And there is a tendency to control Twitter. Wikipedia is closed down, YouTube is closed down, and they're very strict. And we see that also rappers, even Dutch rappers that sing in Turkish, are sentenced to prison if they go back to Turkey. So you have to be a little bit aware. So the freedom of speech is not as it used to be. I will take 1 minute to talk about the tension between Greece and Turkey, and that's the Ege, the Aegean Sea on edge. Ege on edge. What's happening and why the Turkish Navy is in waters? Well, the Aegean dispute has very much to do with the turbulent relations that the Greek Republic and the Turkish Republic have had over the last century. In 1822, 100 years ago, the Greek War of Independence took place. And it led to an independence of Greece, and the Ottoman Empire lost almost everything of its entire huge empire that it had, almost until Vienna. The Pope was really afraid of the Ottomans, the Turks, and actually the Dutch independence fight against Spain. The Dutch were an ally of the Ottomans. So yeah, it's funny at times. We also saw the Greco-Turkish wars, and they took place after the First World War. And in 1923, the start of the Turkish Republic, 1.5 million Greeks were ordered kicked out of Turkey, and 500,000 Turks were kicked out of Greece. You have to realize that the Turks in Greece had been living there as part of Turkey for almost 350 years. So they felt that was home. The grandfather's grandfather's grandfather's grandfather was already living in Heraklion or in Athens, and that was Turkish. And then all of a sudden it was an independence war, and the Greeks were kicked out and the Turks were kicked out, and it got nasty. A lot of people were cleansed and killed and burnt and shot and everything. And even in 1955, we had the 6-7 September riots, and I'll show you some newspaper clippings of it, because it was fierce. It was terrible what was happening. The mobs went into the city to riot, and a lot of people believe it was orchestrated by the government of the time, the Turkish government, because there was some weird bomb that went off at some consulate, and then everybody took revenge. But without social media, how could you get people so quickly together? And they had a kind of Kristallnacht in 1955, and then a lot of people actually left. And we see that in the past, 1/3 of the population was Greek Orthodox. Can you imagine? 1/3 of Turkey was Christian. Wow! And there was a lot of places in Istanbul where actually Greek was spoken, and many other languages, and also Armenians. There were a lot of them, and all of these people have been, thoroughly, it has been cleansed culturally, and not in the nicest way, as we will find out in the future, I hope one day. The other side of the story is, and you might also say that might have been a reaction. I've been in Baku in Nagorno-Karabakh museum, and then you see the other side of it, and you also have to realize that the so-called Bosnak people that lived in Bosnia were slaughtered because they were Muslims, and that was in Europe, and these people were also kicked back to Turkey. So there is always two sides of the story, and it depends on which history book you read, but it has been a very bad side of it, and influences still present day Greek Turco relationships, and they're not the best. One other thing that always has struck me, if I am if you're in Turkey, you can see islands, but they're actually Greek islands. And was really, when I was younger, on an interrail trip, and I remember that they were warning me like, "Oh, don't take the boat to Turkey, because you cannot have the stamp, because we didn't have the European Union as it is now, and you couldn't have the stamp in your passport, and it would really give you trouble if you came from Greece." So I don't know what it's really, but it always surprised me why all these islands are Greek, and I felt like it's a little bit unfair to Turkey, especially if you look at this one here. It's so close, you can throw stones almost. What the reason is that the Greeks got kicked out of the mainland Turkey, but on the islands they remained. And these islands here, until the Second World War, were actually occupied by the Italians. So it was Mussolini with a big army at the time, well, he thought he had it, who was occupying these islands. And after the Second World War, or during actually, the British occupied these islands. And after the war, they handed them to the Greek. Because the islands had an overwhelmingly Greek population. Of course, Turkey really complained about it. And then afterwards, when we started to talk about territorial waters, the maritime division of the land, and now with the important things that are under the sea bottom, and of course Turkey says, yeah, this is ridiculous. Greece is benefiting disproportionately. Tiny little islands, and then you claim enormous amounts, and we as the mainland that is actually there don't get anything of this, and that's why the fight is there. So yeah, I can understand Ankara's anger at the situation a little bit, but you have to also realize that in international ways of dealing with maritime law, Turkey has an opinion that is not supported anywhere else in the world. Maybe China is doing the same a little bit, but the Turkey is concerned, and to some extent I understand, is that the Ege is actually becoming a Greek lake. And they say, hey, what about us? We also have something to say, and why these islands have to be Greek anyway? Well, that's historical. As a result, we see that there is a lot of weapons available, and if shit ever hits the fan, it's going to be nasty because there's so many. Now, of course, the tanks and the soldiers, there's a lot more, but bear in mind that Turkey has other borders as well. So for the rest, they're doing well, except for the amphibious warfare ships. And if you have 33, that is a good thing to get on these islands, wouldn't you think so? and Greece is not going to attack Turkish mainland, so it's just from one island to the other, and then 9 is enough. I think it's that simple. I wish I could have talked about the Turkish cuisine, because this is for me one of the most delicious ones I know. And there's many cuisines, and I enjoy food deeply, but I certainly do care about Turkish food. And I also should say I enjoy that myself. I make it. I make my own carne yaruk or a lot of other dishes, and I think it is an amazing. I think my jajuk is not bad at all, and I care about Turkish food. It's really delicious, and it's so many different tastes. And the markets, if you have the chance to go to Turkey, wow. the paneer, the bread. It's so good. I quite like these desserts that they have. They have special toetjeswinkels, dessert shops where you have usually boiled rice with sugar and taste in it. Not bad. So yeah, my advice is to certainly try. Do they drink alcohol? Actually, yes. Raku, the kind of pastis, is drank a lot. Ouzo is the same taste. The anise liquor, and of course there's beer. There used to be a lot of wines. That is not that much, but there is a good quality wine shop in the Utrechtse Straat here in Amsterdam. There's also a very good Turkish restaurant there as well. What can I say? Just you have to try it out. And I think Amsterdam is a wonderful place to find the Turkish culture. There is enough. And I dare you, try it out sometimes and go a little bit beyond the snack bar style. Go to the real restaurants and be amazed by an incredible, your palate is gonna savor the Turkish lokanta style cooking, the home style of cooking. It is a delicious food. So my friends, I hereby close the Turkey business skills lesson. Yes, we talked a lot about also cultural things and typical other things of the Turkish culture. That's because it's so lovely. So next time, enjoy your chai, enjoy your Turk kahvesi. Visit the country if you enjoy, or visit the Turkish cultural sites here in Amsterdam and or other parts of the country or of the world. And I thank you. I will say çok teşekkür ederim. Thank you very much for watching and see you at another lesson. You're set.
Thank you, Professor.
Hey, wow, I have an audience.
Yes, you have.
Well,
If you have 2 minutes, I would also want to ask something, but for our CP.